Okay, so we're chatting about Sarah Wilkinson's coursework, just based on your research. What are the main things that you found out and how you're proceeding?
Well, when researching about Massive Attack, the main reason why I chose them was because them as a well-known band, it would then create a challenge for me to create a video for them.
Yeah, I suppose it would be, in terms of their videos are very recognisable, so it's kind of a double-edged sword there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, you want to choose a song that perhaps hasn't got a famous video because it would be almost impossible to compete.
Yeah, that's why I didn't go with Teardrop. I instead went with Angel, and because they've got some quite well-known motifs, I wanted to incorporate them in there.
Okay.
So stuff like their lighting and the way that they've edited their videos, that's what I want to include into that.
Okay, so it's almost taking their style but making it your own as well, with your own spin on it. How do you want your audience to respond to your video? Is it that you want to promote, I mean, in terms of the band having a well-known identity, and this is a task, it's that balance between creativity, but also, I suppose, seeing it as a promotional tool, the music video. So how are you wanting people to respond to the band when they watch the video? What kind of themes and ideas are going to come across?
How
How would you define them as a genre?
Well, their genre is called trip hop, which is different genres in one. They take on, there's aspects of punk, there's aspects of a bit of reggae in there, and it's mainly electronic dance music, but then they take bits of everywhere else. And how I'm going to incorporate that in the video is kind of the colours. So they're not going to necessarily be just dance colours. There's going to be a bit of black in there, so like the punk will come across, and it brings in the different styles of what they want to show.
So in terms of your kind of research into real media artefacts and other music videos, what kind of bands would you say are quite similar, and how would you define the audience for those types of bands?
Well, I researched the XX because their style of video is very similar.
Okay.
They go with like the organic sort of natural style of things.
So concept based on the whole.
Yeah, because Teardrop and XX Angel is very similar.
Okay.
The way they're not both babies, but the way that it flows with the beat of the music, and like if there is an extra bass to it, it demonstrates that as well. So it's very visual the way it shows them.
Okay, so in terms of sort of codes and conventions, if we think about Goodwin's codes and conventions in particular, because you've gone for concept based and because of the nature of the music, is it much more about representing the music through the visuals, or are you going to have some type of narrative there, kind of what's going to drive the emotions of that song?
Well, it's mainly going to be concept, so it's going to be visualising the beat of the music. But I'm also going to have a pair of lip sync into the lyrics.
Okay.
Because there isn't much lyrics in there, it means then that kind of just takes it away from the ink, just having that as a video.
Okay, so your main idea, which you've run through with me anyway, is very heavily influenced by another video. How are you going to make sure that yours is distinct from that?
Mine isn't ink blots, so it's not being put on a paper, it's in a tank.
Yeah.
And well, you won't be able to see the tank, but it's mainly focusing on how it moves in the water.
Okay.
So it's not being edited to show Gnarls Barkley singing like in his video. It's more representing the flow of the music.
Okay, so it's very much visuals matching sort of the music and the beat of the music. My only other thing was, obviously it is a risk and a gamble doing a concept video, but your concept seems quite simple and if executed well could be very, very effective. The only thing I was thinking was, in terms of videos having a repeatability factor, how are you going to ensure that it's not too samey, if that makes sense? How are you going to make sure your audience wants to keep watching that video and watch it time and again? Rather, because if it's just one simple concept, what's going to draw them in?
Well, because the Bristolian saga that Massive Attack came from and all the trip hop that came from around there, they were based around drugs at the time, so it's very hypnotic, and so I wanted to represent that. So the way the lips, it draws the audience in, and it's very hypnotic and atmospheric. That's the style I wanted it to go for. So then they're not necessarily looking for a narrative or anything like that. They're watching it because...
I suppose in the editing process, for me, the music changes certainly in terms of... not necessarily the pitch, but the volume does change and does build, and there's kind of crescendos, and it goes like that. So I suppose that would be a case of kind of having a bit more power and reflecting that music. So just make sure that it's not too staid, and maybe through that editing you're really reflecting those changes in volume and pitch.
Like in my storyboard, I've put down the mirroring effect. So like I changed the way that the camera is looking. So instead of it being straight on, I would flip it to the side. So it looks as if the ink is coming in from the sides, and then I'd mirror it. So that's when the final chorus comes in, and then it starts going to the end.
Fantastic. I mean, I really like your concept and idea. I can visualise it, and you've obviously got a really clear vision, so I would just be really interested to see kind of the storyboard and how that's going to play out. I think for you it's going to be a lot of a lot of planning with timing and thinking about that editing.
I have done a few practices at home.
Okay, fantastic.
It was then not as I wanted it to be, because it was just the first attempts, like seeing what would happen if I placed it here and stuff. But once I got the hang of what it would look like when dropping it in, I was able to do a spinning sort of action on it, so that the ink kind of went round and span, and I was just playing about with what I could do with it.
Yeah, and have you got a good idea what camera and equipment you want to use for the best effect? Are you going to borrow one of these and just have a really high quality in terms of colour?
Because it's on a white background, I really want that to just represent. I don't want it to be dirty with just a normal camera.
We want really, we want high resolution, don't we? So, we don't want any graininess there, because that would take away from what we're aiming for. You obviously have a really clear idea of your genre and your audience, which is fantastic. In terms of your audience and as part of your research, looking at industry, distribution, I would suggest that Massive Attack perhaps are quite well known, but maybe are quite niche in terms of their genre of music. So have you started to think about how you would perhaps market this video in terms of your ancillary tasks? Are you going to go for a magazine advert? Are you going for the 2 print options? Or
I'm going for the print options. But because the audience is aged from about 18 to 30, it is, and for people who also like them from different ages. But the sort of audience that is my target audience is like the die-hard Massive Attack fans. They're not particularly one age, but I'm aiming it at that age in my video.
Would you suggest, if a lot of their music is kind of quite visual based, quite artistic in general, would you consider perhaps the digipack being particularly significant, and that perhaps if it is die-hard fans, they're much more likely to buy CDs, which we see as not being particularly as popular anymore?
And I also thought if I had the time, I'd do 2 posters. So one would be like the limited edition collectors. Oh,
fantastic, good. So it's really tapping into that kind of, this idea of it being a collectible item, being quite an artistic piece of memorabilia almost, isn't it, as well? And in terms of distribution, I suppose
it'd mainly be on, like, for 18s to the 20s. That would be mainly over the internet. So
so you are still going to go that route.
They would be digitally targeted. They would be like over Twitter or campaigns and stuff.
So viral marketing, just thinking about how that would work for that band. Okay, well, it sounds fantastic. I just think for me the next stage is going to be to just really plan that out thoroughly, really. But that sounds great. Okay.